Imagine this. You wake up in a world where you are more connected than ever before. Your phone buzzes with notifications, messages from friends, updates from family, likes on your latest post. You scroll through a feed filled with faces, stories, and moments that seem to promise belonging. Yet, as you sit there, surrounded by the glow of your screen, a strange emptiness creeps in. You feel alone. Not just alone, but profoundly disconnected, as if the very tools designed to bring you closer to others have instead built an invisible wall between you and the world. How can this be? How can a society so advanced, so interconnected, leave so many of us feeling isolated? This is the paradox of modern loneliness. We have never been more capable of reaching out, yet never more starved of true connection. The question lingers, heavy and unspoken: why does modern society, with all its progress, breed such deep and pervasive loneliness? Consider this: you walk into a crowded cafe. Every table is occupied, yet the room is eerily silent. Heads are bowed, eyes fixed on screens. Conversations are replaced by the soft tapping of thumbs on glass. The people here are together, yet they are not. They are sharing space, but not presence. This is not an anomaly. It is the norm. It is the quiet tragedy of our age. A world where we are surrounded by people but feel utterly unseen. What is it about our modern way of life that makes this possible? Is it the pace of life, the relentless demands of work and productivity that leave no room for genuine connection? Or is it something deeper, something woven into the fabric of our culture, a shift in how we see ourselves and each other? Think about the last time you felt truly understood, not just heard but seen, your fears, your hopes, your quirks acknowledged and accepted. For many, that moment is a distant memory, buried under layers of superficial interactions and curated personas. We live in a world where authenticity is often sacrificed at the altar of convenience, where vulnerability is seen as a weakness rather than a bridge to intimacy. And yet, we crave connection. It is a fundamental human need, as essential as food or water. So why do we settle for the crumbs of interaction when we hunger for the feast of true belonging? Why do we trade depth for speed, intimacy for efficiency? The answer lies not in the tools we use, but in the way we use them. Social media, for all its promises, often becomes a stage where we perform rather than a space where we connect. We present polished versions of ourselves, hiding our flaws and fears behind filters and captions. We measure our worth in likes and followers, reducing the complexity of human experience to a series of metrics. In doing so, we create a double-edged sword, the illusion of connection and the reality of isolation. But this is only the surface. Beneath it lies a deeper, more insidious force, a cultural shift that has redefined what it means to be human. We live in an age of individualism, where the self is celebrated above all else. This is not inherently wrong. The pursuit of self-expression and personal growth is a hallmark of modernity. Yet, when taken to extremes, it becomes a prison. We become so focused on our own journeys, our own identities, that we forget the simple truth: we are not meant to walk this world alone. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once wrote, "Hell is other people, but what if the opposite is also true? What if heaven too is other people? What if the very thing we fear, the messiness, the vulnerability, the unpredictability of human connection, is also the thing we need most?" As you sit with these questions, consider this: loneliness is not just a personal failing. It is a societal one. It is a symptom of a world that has lost its way, a world that has traded depth for speed, intimacy for efficiency, and connection for convenience. But it is not inevitable. It is not the end of the story. The question now is not why we feel this way, but what we will do about it. How will we break free from the invisible chains that bind us? How will we reclaim the connections that make us human? The answers lie ahead, but they begin here, in the recognition of the problem, and the courage to confront it. This is not just a story about loneliness. It is a story about what it means to be human in a world that has forgotten how to connect. And it is a story that demands to be told. To understand why modern society breeds loneliness, we must first confront the uncomfortable truth. Loneliness is not merely the absence of people. It is the absence of meaning. It is the chasm between who we are and who we long to be, between the connections we crave and the ones we settle for. It is a symptom of a deeper malaise, a crisis of identity, purpose, and belonging that has been centuries in the making. Let us journey back to the roots of this crisis. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once warned of the death of God, not as a theological statement, but as a cultural one. He foresaw a world where traditional sources of meaning, religion, community, shared values, would erode, leaving individuals adrift in a sea of existential uncertainty. In such a world, he argued, we would be forced to confront the void within ourselves, to create our own meaning in the absence of external guidance. Nietzsche's prophecy has come to pass. Modernity has liberated us from the constraints of tradition, but it has also stripped away the structures that once gave our lives coherence. We are free to be whoever we want to be, but this freedom comes at a cost, the burden of self-creation. Without a shared narrative to anchor us, we are left to navigate the chaos of existence alone. This is where loneliness begins, not in the absence of others, but in the absence of a shared story. In pre-modern societies, identity was largely collective. People defined themselves in relation to their tribe, their village, their faith. They found meaning in their roles as parents, workers, and members of a community. But in the modern world, identity has become individualistic. We are encouraged to see ourselves as autonomous beings, separate from the web of relationships that once bound us together. This shift has profound psychological consequences. Carl Jung, the pioneering psychologist, argued that the self is inherently relational. We are not islands. We are nodes in a vast network of connections. When these connections are severed, we experience a fragmentation of the self, a sense of disconnection not only from others but from our own inner depths. Jung's insights are echoed in the work of Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and founder of logotherapy. Frankl observed that the deepest human need is not pleasure or power, but meaning. In the concentration camps, he saw that those who survived were not necessarily the strongest or the most resourceful, but those who found purpose in their suffering. They clung to the belief that their lives mattered, that their existence was part of something greater than themselves. In modern society, this sense of meaning is increasingly elusive. We live in a world that values productivity over purpose, consumption over connection. We are told that happiness lies in the accumulation of wealth, status, and possessions, but these things are poor substitutes for the deeper yearnings of the soul. They may numb the pain of loneliness, but they cannot heal it. The problem is compounded by the rise of technology. The digital age has brought us unprecedented convenience, but it has also reshaped the way we relate to one another. Social media, for all its benefits, has created a culture of comparison and performance. We present curated versions of ourselves, hiding our vulnerabilities behind carefully crafted personas. In doing so, we perpetuate a cycle of disconnection. The more we perform, the less we are seen. The less we are seen, the lonelier we become. This is not to say that technology is inherently evil. It is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or ill. The problem lies not in the technology itself, but in the way we use it, and the way it uses us. Algorithms are designed to capture our attention, to keep us scrolling, clicking, consuming. They thrive on our insecurities, our fears, our need for validation. In the process, they erode our capacity for genuine connection. But the roots of loneliness run even deeper than technology or individualism. They lie in the very structure of modern life. We live in a world that is increasingly fragmented, where the rhythms of work, family, and community are out of sync. The demands of capitalism pull us in one direction. The needs of the soul pull us in another. We are caught in a perpetual state of tension, torn between the desire for connection and the pressures of survival. This tension is not new. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer described it as the pendulum of life, swinging between the pain of desire and the boredom of satisfaction. In modern society, this pendulum has become a whirlwind, spinning us faster and faster until we lose sight of what truly matters. And yet, even in the midst of this chaos, there is hope. The very forces that have created loneliness, individualism, technology, capitalism, also contain the seeds of its solution. The question is not whether we can escape these forces, but how we can transform them. How can we reclaim our humanity in a world that seems determined to strip it away? The answer lies in understanding the deeper psychological and philosophical roots of our loneliness. It lies in recognizing that we are not merely victims of circumstance, but active participants in our own disconnection. And it lies in the courage to confront the void within ourselves, to face the darkness and emerge with a renewed sense of purpose. This is the journey we must undertake. It is not an easy one, but it is necessary. For only by understanding the hidden forces that shape our lives can we begin to break free from their grip. Only by confronting the roots of our loneliness can we hope to find the connection we so desperately crave. And so, we turn to the next chapter of this story, the unseen consequences of our modern way of life. What happens when loneliness becomes not just a personal struggle, but a societal norm? What happens when an entire generation grows up in a world where true connection is the exception rather than the rule? The answers are as unsettling as they are urgent, but they are also the key to our liberation. Imagine a world where loneliness is not an exception, but the norm. A world where people walk through life like ghosts, their faces illuminated by screens, their hearts shrouded in silence. This is not a dystopian fantasy. It is the reality we are creating. The consequences of this reality are profound, far-reaching, and often invisible. They shape not only our individual lives but the very fabric of society. Loneliness is not just a feeling, it is a force. It alters the way we think, the way we behave, and the way we relate to one another. It seeps into our minds, distorting our perceptions and amplifying our fears. It whispers lies to us, that we are unworthy, that we are alone in our struggles, that no one could ever truly understand us. And because these lies are so pervasive, so deeply ingrained, we begin to believe them. The psychological toll of loneliness is well documented. Studies have shown that chronic loneliness can lead to depression, anxiety, and even physical illness. It weakens the immune system, increases the risk of heart disease, and shortens lifespan. But the effects go beyond the individual. Loneliness is contagious. It spreads through social networks like a virus, infecting not only the lonely but those around them. This contagion is fueled by cognitive biases, mental shortcuts that distort our perception of reality. One such bias is the spotlight effect, the tendency to believe that others are paying more attention to us than they actually are. When we are lonely, this bias becomes a weapon of self-destruction. We imagine that everyone is judging us, that our flaws are magnified in the eyes of others. This fear of judgment drives us further into isolation, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of loneliness. Another bias is confirmation bias, the tendency to seek out information that confirms our existing beliefs. When we are lonely, we are more likely to interpret neutral or ambiguous social cues as evidence of rejection. A friend's delayed response to a text becomes a sign of disinterest. A stranger's averted gaze becomes a reflection of our unworthiness. These misinterpretations reinforce our sense of isolation, making it harder to reach out and connect. But the consequences of loneliness are not limited to the psychological realm. They extend into the social and cultural fabric of society. Loneliness erodes trust, the glue that holds communities together. When we feel disconnected, we are less likely to trust others, less likely to cooperate, and less likely to engage in acts of kindness. This erosion of trust creates a feedback loop, further isolating individuals and fragmenting communities. In his book Brave New World, Aldous Huxley envisioned a society where people were kept docile and compliant through the constant distraction of pleasure. In many ways, this vision has come to pass. Modern society offers us an endless array of distractions: social media, streaming services, online shopping, that keep us entertained but disconnected. These distractions are not neutral. They are designed to exploit our vulnerabilities, to keep us scrolling, clicking, consuming. The result is a culture of superficiality, where depth and meaning are sacrificed at the altar of convenience. We settle for shallow interactions, for likes and comments instead of genuine conversations. We mistake the illusion of connection for the real thing, and in doing so, we perpetuate our own loneliness. But the consequences go even deeper. Loneliness is not just a personal struggle, it is a societal one. It undermines the foundations of democracy, which rely on trust, cooperation, and a shared sense of purpose. When people feel disconnected, they are more likely to retreat into tribalism, to seek solace in ideologies that promise belonging but deliver only division. This is the paradox of modern loneliness. The more connected we become, the more fragmented we feel. The tools that were meant to bring us together have instead driven us apart. We are drowning in a sea of information, yet starved of wisdom. We are surrounded by people, yet starved of connection. And yet, even in the midst of this crisis, there is hope. The first step toward healing is awareness. The recognition that loneliness is not just a personal failing, but a societal one. It is a symptom of a world that has lost its way, a world that has traded depth for speed, intimacy for efficiency, and connection for convenience. But awareness alone is not enough. We must also confront the deeper forces that shape our lives, the cultural, economic, and technological forces that perpetuate loneliness. We must ask ourselves, what kind of world do we want to live in? What kind of connections do we want to have? And what are we willing to do to create that world? The answers to these questions will not come easily. They will require courage, creativity, and a willingness to challenge the status quo. But they are necessary if we are to break free from the invisible chains that bind us. As we turn to the next chapter of this story, we will explore how to do just that. How can we rebel against the forces that breed loneliness? How can we reclaim our humanity in a world that seems determined to strip it away? The journey ahead is not an easy one, but it is a necessary one. For only by confronting the unseen consequences of our modern way of life can we hope to find the connection we so desperately crave. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast, dark forest. The trees loom tall and foreboding, their shadows stretching endlessly before you. Behind you lies the familiar path, the one paved with convenience, distraction, and superficial connection. It is safe, predictable, and utterly suffocating. Ahead lies the unknown, a wilderness where the rules of modern life no longer apply. To step into this forest is to rebel against everything you have been taught about how to live. It is to choose depth over speed, vulnerability over performance, and meaning over metrics. This is the rebellion against loneliness. It is not a call to abandon technology, reject modernity, or retreat into isolation. It is a call to reclaim what it means to be human in a world that has forgotten. It is a call to confront the forces that breed loneliness and to create a new way of living, one rooted in authenticity, connection, and purpose. The first step in this rebellion is to recognize that loneliness is not a personal failing, but a systemic one. It is not something to be ashamed of, but something to be understood and addressed. This shift in perspective is crucial, for it allows us to move from self-blame to self-empowerment. It allows us to see that we are not alone in our struggle, that our loneliness is a shared experience, and that together, we can create a different reality. But how do we begin? The answer lies in a radical shift in mindset, a rejection of the values that perpetuate loneliness, and an embrace of those that foster connection. This shift requires us to challenge some of the most deeply ingrained beliefs of modern society, that success is measured by productivity, that vulnerability is a weakness, and that connection is a luxury rather than a necessity. One of the most powerful tools in this rebellion is the practice of presence. In a world that values multitasking and constant stimulation, presence is an act of defiance. It is the choice to be fully here, fully now, with ourselves and with others. This might mean putting away our phones during conversations, setting boundaries around work, or simply taking a moment to breathe and notice the world around us. Presence is not easy. It requires discipline and intentionality, but it is also deeply rewarding, for it allows us to experience the richness of life that often passes us by. Another key to breaking free from loneliness is the cultivation of vulnerability. Vulnerability is often misunderstood as weakness, but in truth, it is the foundation of all meaningful connection. It is the willingness to show up as we are, without pretense or performance. It is the courage to say, "This is me, with all my flaws and fears, and I am worthy of love and belonging." The philosopher Martin Buber spoke of the difference between I-it and I-thou relationships. In an I-it relationship, we see others as objects, tools to be used, obstacles to be overcome, or mirrors to reflect our own desires. In an I-thou relationship, we see others as they truly are, unique, complex, and infinitely valuable. This shift from I-it to I-thou is at the heart of the rebellion against loneliness. It is the choice to see and be seen, to connect not out of obligation or convenience, but out of genuine care and curiosity. But the rebellion does not end with individual actions. It also requires collective effort, a reimagining of the structures and systems that shape our lives. This might mean advocating for policies that prioritize community well-being over economic growth, creating spaces that foster genuine connection, or simply reaching out to those around us with kindness and compassion. History offers us examples of those who have rebelled against the forces of disconnection. Viktor Frankl, in the depths of a concentration camp, found meaning in the act of caring for others. The civil rights movement, in the face of systemic oppression, built a sense of solidarity and purpose that transcended individual suffering. These examples remind us that even in the darkest of times, connection is possible, and that it is often in the act of reaching out to others that we find our own salvation. The rebellion against loneliness is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process. It requires us to constantly question the values and norms of modern society, to choose connection over convenience, and to embrace the messiness and unpredictability of human relationships. It is not an easy path, but it is a necessary one. As we stand at the edge of the forest, the choice is ours. Will we continue down the familiar path, safe but suffocating? Or will we step into the unknown, embracing the risk and reward of true connection? The journey ahead is uncertain, but it is also full of possibility. For in the act of rebelling against loneliness, we reclaim not only our humanity but our capacity for joy, meaning, and belonging. And so, we turn to the final chapter of this story, the ultimate truth that lies at the heart of our struggle. What is the deepest revelation about loneliness? And how can it transform the way we see ourselves and the world? Imagine this. You are standing at the edge of a vast ocean, the waves crashing against the shore with a rhythm that feels both ancient and eternal. The horizon stretches endlessly, a reminder of the infinite possibilities that lie beyond what you can see. As you stand there, you feel a profound sense of connection, not just to the ocean, but to everything. The people, the trees, the sky, the stars. You realize, in a moment of clarity, that you are not separate from the world. You are a part of it, woven into its fabric, inseparable from its beauty and its chaos. This is the ultimate truth about loneliness. It is not a reflection of your inadequacy, but a mirror of your humanity. It is not a flaw to be fixed, but a call to be answered. Loneliness is the ache of a soul that knows it is meant for more connection, more meaning, more life. It is the reminder that you are not an island, but a thread in the tapestry of existence. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer once compared human beings to porcupines on a cold winter's night. To survive, they must huddle together for warmth, but in doing so, they risk pricking one another with their quills. The solution, he argued, is to find the right distance, close enough to share warmth, but far enough to avoid harm. This metaphor captures the paradox of human connection. We need each other to survive, but we also hurt each other in the process. The ultimate truth is that loneliness is not the absence of connection, but the longing for it. It is the space between who we are and who we could be, between the relationships we have and the ones we crave. It is the gap that reminds us of our potential, our capacity for love, and our need for belonging. But this truth is not just personal, it is universal. Loneliness is not your burden alone. It is the shared experience of being human. It is the thread that connects us all, the common ground that reminds us of our interdependence. In a world that often feels fragmented and divided, loneliness is the silent call to come together, to bridge the gaps, and to create a new way of being. The final revelation is this: loneliness is not the enemy, it is the teacher. It is the force that pushes us to grow, to reach out, to become more than we are. It is the catalyst for transformation, the spark that ignites the fire of connection. Without loneliness, we might never know the depth of our need for one another. Without loneliness, we might never discover the power of vulnerability, the beauty of presence, or the joy of belonging. This realization is not an endpoint, but a beginning. It is the invitation to step into the ocean, to embrace the waves, and to trust in the current that carries us forward. It is the call to live not as isolated individuals, but as part of a greater whole. As you stand at the edge of the ocean, you realize that the journey does not end here. It is ongoing, a lifelong process of reaching out, of building bridges, of creating meaning. It is the choice to see loneliness not as a curse, but as a gift, a reminder of what it means to be alive, to be human, to be connected. And so, the story of loneliness becomes a story of hope. It is the story of a world that is waking up to the power of connection, to the beauty of vulnerability, and to the possibility of a new way of living. It is the story of you, standing at the edge of the ocean, ready to dive in. The waves are calling. Will you answer?